Yo, how's everyone doing? This is True Crypto 28, Mr. Anderson on Twitter. All right, so I promised everybody a video on my tool, which everyone can get access to, which is called TrueVibration 2.0. This is an algo that I basically have produced with help, of course, that basically tries to mimic some of the things that I look into when I'm trading. Now, it's not a crystal ball. This is a tool. The tool is there to be a helping hand. It has helped a tremendous amount of people. But of course, I say it's for active traders, right? Because you want to have some technical knowledge, TA knowledge, some abilities, skills. And then if that's the case, this will allow you to work smarter, not harder. And it will help you to shape your trade in the right direction. At least it's done extremely well. I mean, all I've had is extremely positive feedback on it. But the idea here is that if you contact me on Twitter, if you're not familiar with it, then contact me on Twitter directly through a DM, and we'll work on getting you set up. I will say this is that I had a huge loss recently at the time, recently to making this particular video. So if you're watching it within the first week or so of my release of the video, just understand that it's going to be a few day delay. I'm going to be out of town. And the people that I usually have looking into the DMs are doing other things as well. And I also know there's a few people that have been patiently waiting, as again, I did suffer and accrue a significant loss recently in the family. And because of that, we really put a pause on adding people, but we're going to start adding them back in these coming days. So I appreciate your patience, but just feel free to bump that message and know that we're going to get to it. But with that said, DM on Twitter. I also have a sponsor, of course, that is Prime XBT. Just go to this address right here. I'm going to put a link down there as well, but go to this address. You can click on that link below, right under the description there. And the good thing about Prime, first of all, like most exchanges, they have a lot of cool assets, different functionality, etc., that you have to walk through and get used to. But there's a lot of tutorials on YouTube that can easily walk you through that. Basically take your trading serious, learn how to do it, take 30 minutes, an hour to kind of get familiar with it. The huge benefit that most people see is the fact that they're willing to give you a 50% trading account bonus, which can have significant advantages for you. So if that's up to 1 Bitcoin, meaning they'll fund an extra half Bitcoin to your trading account as well. So ultimately, whatever you decide to put in, if you put in 2,000, put an extra 1,000 into the trading account itself, which is a nice benefit as well. And that can help you to get accustomed to it. I did have a bunch of people say, "Oh, I've had a Prime XBT account before." From what I understand, if you utilize a new email address, that's fine. Other people that also might be in a country that they usually have to use VPN or something along those lines. In that situation, just when you go through registration, leave the phone number blank, and that won't come up at all. I'm not telling you, to do anything that's illegal or anything along those lines. Of course, you guys make your own decisions, but I'm just saying that if you're trying to avoid any headaches along those lines, that's how you would do that. But basically, once you register for an account, you can register and just kind of check it out. But before making your deposit, you just go into the promo code section, and you're going to put in True Crypto, just like this. And once you then fund your account after activating that particular code, that's what will get you the 50% trading account bonus. Okay. All right. So let me just jump into this. Again, we're going to use TrueVibration. I know many of you guys use it, but if you don't, trust me on the things I say. The only thing I'm only going to go over, just so you understand, because this thing is very complex, has a lot of intricacies, and complex in a good way, meaning there's a lot that you can do with it. But I'm only going to utilize things that I have released video content on for the users, right? I will speak about nothing else other than the very specific strategies that were released in the several videos that I have given out when speaking about this particular item, right? So here's how it goes. First and foremost, just want to go over a couple different things. Now, I will show you this. Again, you may have to rewind this, slow it down, because I am going to go fairly quick. I don't want to put anyone in a position to where it's difficult for them, but at the same time, I don't want to extend the video. So if you miss something, please understand that just rewatch is going to help you anyway. But again, I'll repeat one last time. Everything that I will mention is coming directly from a video that's already been made. So you can take my word on it, but then you can also watch those videos that you could see that these strategies were released, right? All right, so first and foremost, I want to mark off a couple areas, right? So this is a weekly. And if you're not familiar with true vibration, I will go ahead and just tell you a couple basic things. There's a lot going on here. When you see this green, orange, red, this is basically dealing with momentum only, right? Now, the key, obviously, is you would like your price action and your momentum to line up so you have confluence. But there's a lot of different elements here, not only taking a very advanced look at momentum, but we can also utilize some more simplified signals as well, which I'll talk about in a minute. But there's all kinds of elements here. One thing I will tell you is this main purple line is what's called FSR. This is the main source of the algorithm by far. I will point out a couple brief things here, but I'm just really setting up everything that's from the video, as I mentioned. So right as of this point, this is the first time, and I want to mark this off, that the weekly went into an early bearish momentum signal, right? And then this is the first time that the weekly went into a bearish momentum signal. Now, that doesn't mean that it's bearish. So I don't want you to think that, oh, this means that we nailed it. No, bearish momentum, depending on your time frame, it doesn't mean that, hey, you're going to have bearish price action. In fact, if the price action holds structure during that time, so if we would have held up here during that whole time, that would have been uber bullish, right? In fact, even here, when you started to bounce, this could have been a bullish scenario if you would have made a higher high and then possibly went off to the races, right? And then you would see this momentum recycle, right? So you do see a scenario in here where you had early bear momentum, but it recycled, and that meant huge burst. Speaking of burst, I was going to mention it later, but these green signals here are burst signals, right? That means that there's significant confluence that allow for a much greater chance of a breakout possibility coming, right? So you see burst here, it did subside, but you eventually got that into another burst. Then again, a little bit of a contraction, and then boom, right into expansion and trend again. Massive burst again. This is a beautiful bursting scenario that came up. But then notice something very interesting here. You notice this entire last leg does not have a single burst. That's these triangles right here. Not one, not on the weekly scale. That's relative because the momentum was waning the entire time. But hey, we're talking about the most bullish asset in history, so was able to make a significant leg up, another $20,000. So I'm going to show you that that in itself didn't mean a signal, but it is a sign or something to think about of like, we're not getting the confluence that we need on the high time frame. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is, actually I do want to keep that one on the weekly. I just wanted to mark off those couple of areas. And again, this is straight from videos that have already been released on strategies. I will not invent anything. I'm not candy coating anything or picking out specifics. I haven't gone over this or anything along those lines. The only thing that I'm going to do here is show you those exact strategies that were released on video, okay? So I know I repeated that too many times, but I know how people like to kind of paint these stories to their benefit, and that's not what's going on. So one of the strategies is, hey, when we go to a bearish scenario on the weekly, we're going to look to line it up with a daily, right? So this is a simplified version. It's not the most simplified. The most simplified is the color change that I'll tell you in a minute, but don't worry about that. In this simplified version, we talk about matching a weekly to a daily, and then you can also match a weekly to a H4. I know people that like to do daily to H4, daily to H1. That's up to you, but I'm just going to go over the video content. Now, technically, the video is from here, right? Because this is early warning, but I'm still going to show you the early warnings just to kind of show you the effect of what happens. Because ultimately, we went weekly warning at that point, and then they turned into a bear scenario here. Now, you only got 3 days of bearish before it recycled, and FSR will show you that it's recycling, which is good. It gives you some heads up because it's heading back in that direction. You do make a higher high, but then eventually we see red come in again, right? And you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days now and a lower low before it begins to cycle up yet again. And then we see obviously some traversing here within that momentum cycle, but you could see that the collaboration between the two, meaning between the red and the early weekly, is showing that there is significant drops coming in, because those are significant drops that we just showed. We're talking about a high percentage drop within that. Now, I will only going to focus though on this red and red, just like the video, okay? So just like the video states, once you get this setup that comes into play where you're red and red, you're going to wait, obviously, to see what comes about it. You're going to look for something like a local high and look for some shorts at that point. At that point, you are looking for shorts, right? Because you have a situation where you're red on red. This is not good. So now this is a recycling. This will have to really amp up and get rid of this red to stop this particular signal. So we head on up, and you see that it's trying its best. It actually tries a couple different times. You end up putting a significant bear divergence in, which we'll talk about later, right there at the lower high top. This is the first real official lower high from the top. And then that turns into a local high, and essentially you eventually get red. Now, the red doesn't come back in. This is daily scale, right? So it's slower. Not until right there, right? But right there, which is a absolute sell signal, is $49,888. And from that point, as you know, it dropped to 28,157. This is straight from the video. $21,000 drop from the signal. Okay? So that's a significant edge, obviously, when you get that type of setup. Now, what we spoke about in the video is like, look, that's a hell of a setup. You're talking about weekly to daily. How many are you really going to get? Not so many, right? But ultimately, you can take that weekly and then pop it down to the time frame like the 4-hour as an example. So we're going to review that. Same situation. I'm going to go weekly, starting right there, which lines up right there, just so you see we're not trying to make anything up. And we're going to wait for the same scenarios to come into play. And ultimately, when you get red right here, what you see is you were at 57,000. It eventually made its way down to 52,000. But there's a catch here. Although this is a signal, you know I'm into market structure first always, right? I prefer to see a lower high first, right? I'm not saying it wasn't a tradable signal. I'm not saying you could have taken it as some sort of H4 type of scalp scenario. It is a signal regardless. We don't use necessarily that rule, but anyone that's already familiar with the tool understands that I prefer to see that market structure. I rather wait for the confirmation of a lower high. But still, I'm showing you, right? So, obviously, if I was trying to brag on the indicator, I would just say like, oh, look, the signal worked. Okay, well, it did. But at the same time, I do prefer to wait till I'm getting the lower high with that particular signal. And we look like we get one here. And I'm going to show you this as well because this one's a failure, right? So we turn red briefly, right? And immediately this is a loss. You would have got stopped out. Hey, that happens. That's trading. Oh, no big deal. And then here again, now this one is not a lower high. Looks like a great signal. You might have taken it. As I mentioned, it is a qualified signal based on that technique that I showed in the video. But again, it is not the lower high, right? Hell of a payoff, right? So this is a hell of a payoff from that signal. You're talking about 58,190. It eventually made its way down to 53,849. That works out very well. I'll take nearly 10% any day of the week. But regardless, the one that I'm most interested in becomes this one, right? This one, because now this is after a clear lower high. Market structure first always. Not only am I getting the confluence of this signal, which is a signal all of itself, as I mentioned, but now I also have that confirmation of market structure right there. And actually, technically, would be right there is where we got that. So it's the third candle in the formation. Now, you might see that other pink candle. That's another signal. This is actually the most basic signal that exists. And I'll talk about that a little bit more when we go to the daily chart. But it gave you that one even one earlier. But at this point, this is a hell of a concern. This is an absolute short. Not to mention the fact you're below the 200 on H4. It's happening right after a lower high. You're getting this death signal of H4 matching up with a red weekly. And it occurred at 55,500. It didn't occur at 60,000, right? You're not going to pick tops. Don't pick trend-changing tops. I promise you, you'll live longer. Trust me. It's not. You rather wait for some element of confirmation. And sometimes the confirmation will be wrong, right? I told you about this trade. This one would have failed. Okay, that's trading. Look, I establish my risk. I take my loss. No big deal, right? The point is that you're in a position here to where you ultimately find yourself getting into one hell of a position, right? It puts you into a great situation to where you're at 55,000 and change on an entry. And I will tell you that there is literally never a reason to exit this particular trade. Never would you have had lowered your stop loss to a point where you said, oh, I got to get out. And you have the confluence of the moving averages that come with this tool. You continue to see rotation back to red without seeing positive market structure. So literally you could have rode that from 55,000 to 28,000 and change. But regardless, maybe you took some profits along the way. I completely understand. And you're basically in a position to where you get, again, another signal here. Now, we've spoken about this on the videos as well. Sometimes you'll get this at a low or after it's dropped significantly, in which case, what are you doing? Wait for some bear exhaustion, which means that you wait for a return some type of run up, and a local high. And that next local high that's established, if you don't know what that is, that's on the videos as well. Once that next local high is established, which is right there, that's your signal. So that's your entry, gives you that next leg down. We see it come in again. Hey, that reactivates the signal. Same thing. If I get another local high, which is right there, you would have had a stop 1 ATR above. That's also on the videos. And now again, you're in one hell of a move down again. And then even here at this point, before the mega drop, whether you had the courage to take it or not, who knows after such a drop. So I'm not going to claim credit, but that was at 38,000. It went to 28,000, another 10,000. So original position would have held. It gave you multiple entries beyond that, etc. And then finally, you start to enter into a situation where you did get another mini red here. If you did take it, then look, again, you would have got stopped out. You see the green candle come into play. Obviously, that low, that is not lower than this level. Again, that's from the videos as well. So this is actually a qualified buy signal on that, on this particular H4 pattern. But you get the point here. This was something that paid off a ridiculous amount. Forget all the other alts, and they actually gave even better signals than this with using this tool. But I didn't want to point that out, right? I really wanted to point that out. Now let me do this. I'm going to erase all this, go back to the daily, and I do want to point something out as well, because I know some people got lost on this. I'm not saying you should have got it, or I never say that. Look, I miss trades all the time, guys, right? I did post literally at this very moment, resistance is resisting, and it's happening at the worst possible spot, right? It was happening at the worst spot. This was the ideal spot to resist, but it was okay. I didn't expect it to dump out like that. You still could have been okay if you came and held structure, held that low, and start to build off from there. Then you could have had something, but it did happen at the worst spot. That's reality. But I want to show you something. Now, there's a simplified signal. Again, that is explained in those videos, so take my word for now. Don't think every pink is a signal. It is not. I've explained how you get a signal, right? But this one's very tricky because you're dealing with, again, one of the most one of the greatest assets in history here. So this is actually the first qualified short that you get on the daily scale utilizing the most basic signal. And look what happens. It's a terrible, terrible short. But I will tell you, it's using the most simplified elements that can be imaginable. Anyone that's actually looking at FSR understands that FSR did not give you the signal, which would have been what? To drop below these three amigos here, these other three lines here. But regardless, it's okay. It is what it is. That one wouldn't have worked. And then probably this one as well would not have worked. But there's something very specific that I spoke about in the videos, right? Which is that you're comparing always this session of FSR, the purple line, to the previous one, right? And that's what you're measuring your high. And then a lot of times what will happen is you'll start to see some signals pop off, but you might put in a divergence. Now, normally this happens on the lower time frame. When it happens on the higher time frame, glorious, right? Because what I've expressed is that when that happens, the signal is actually stronger at the divergent point, right? So price goes up, but it's far less than this, which is the area we're utilizing to compare our last signal. Again, this is from the video. It's explaining quite tremendous detail, so we're not making anything up. But look what happens here. Significant bear divergence during this time. Now, this isn't established as a signal until right there. I know some of you guys drilled this, which is great, not intentionally thinking you were going to get what you got. But at that point, that's that signal, which is 55912. Now, I've already showed you 20 other ways where the signal would have worked out perfectly. But just looking at this one as well, if you happen to be looking at the daily, of course, we've already seen the H4 would have done extremely well. But on the daily scale, after a couple misses and taking small losses, as we always should, identifying our risk and saying, all right, just getting out like a man if we see that we're wrong. In this situation, that's your entry. And again, you never had to exit. I mean, you just basically, at some point, surely you took some profits, which is fine, but it gave you just a tremendous signal. And you weren't worried at any point because the bounces were just exhaustingly bad, right? So that's another idea, just using the most basic version of it. I already spoke about the burst. I was going to go over that next, but I want to point out one other element of these burst signals, right? So you notice what we have here during the structure. I want to show you. So here's Bitcoin and all its magic internet money power. What do you see from the moment of takeoff? Green burst signals. These are the ones that you watch out for and say, oh, wow, we have a greater chance at some real expansion, right? The confluence is significant. And it happens, and it happens, and it happens, and it happens. But notice what's going on down here. Nothing. You notice that the bear cycles have no burst at any point, zero, zip, not. That comes from October to May 9th on the daily, right? Which was your last chance of a burst, and the burst fade, obviously. And by the way, these are failed bursts ultimately. I mean, it was a nice little gain there, about $13,000, but still, the idea is that you're trying to push higher, and it didn't occur, which will happen. But the idea is it's giving you an edge to say that, hey, there's a more opportunity to see bursts in these type of situations. Now, the other thing that can give you some hints now, if you start to see the burst and there's some bear divergence, of course, hey, let me head out. I created a local top, bear divergence, forget the burst signal, market structure first always, also from the videos, right? But regardless, here we are. What happens here? You notice this? Bear burst. Now, granted, it started happening at 49,000, but the idea is that we didn't see one of those since the first week of October. Probably something you should take note of, right? You're talking about 8 months without one of these signals, and there it is. And you get 1, 2, 3, 4 within that range. 4 within that range before it broke down. 4 bursts in a row, right? And that's the key. Remember, the more bursts in a row, the more powerful, right? So when you see significant amount of bursts like this, you're really going to make that push. Sometimes you'll make the burst, and it doesn't make the push as far as you could or as far as you would like because supply comes in. But look at this. I mean, if that's not a signal, what is? 4 bursts in a row, you're still at 46,000 before dropping another 18,000 change. Okay, so there was so many elements. One other thing I'll show you here, if we go down to this, well, first of all, I showed you earlier. I mean, I might as well just touch base on it here. I'll mark this level off. We already know the weekly is red, right? And then from this point, the daily was red. So now I'm going to go all the way down to a 10-minute chart. 10-minute, guys, right? What are you doing down on the 10-minute? Well, we have something called a 10-minute scalping technique, right? Only reason I'm making it so small so I can go find my line, which is right there. And then utilizing my, what I call a trend scalper, right? I'm not even going to count any of these in the first day because sometimes obviously you need, so this was the 12th to 13th. Let's go to the 13th, right? What happens is you got to understand the signal comes at the candle close. So obviously anything on the 12th we wouldn't have gotten, that comes here. And what we're looking for now is just any opportunity that where red comes in, right? Now you can take the early signal as I mentioned. So early signal, trend scalp from there on the 10-minute, look at the leg down, or if you waited for red, that's up to you. Look at the leg down and multiple entries. I mean, this is a significant move, guys. We're talking about a scalping tool that went from 51,000, 50,900, and eventually stopped out at 48.5. That's a hell of a move, right? When you're on the 10-minute. Then we go again right here. Now this one, same scenario. A little bit of a thrust up. Now, whether your stop was tight enough, I shouldn't have been. Just looking at it, that this should have been okay. But regardless, ultimately, maybe you get stopped out, so we won't count it if that happens. But if not, then what you see is what? Significant move down again from that 10-minute scalper, right? Comes in again. Now, these are the early signals. We say usually like 3 to 8 candles, right? Anything beyond that, you might be getting a little bit greedy. Look what we get. And of course, take some profits along the way. You get a nice move down, just cash in some of it. This one on the early signal would have been a loss. That happens. This early signal would have paid you off greatly. By the way, if you've been taking these the whole time, you're probably pretty damn happy. Here's another signal right there. It pays you off gloriously. And these are the environments. Now, this particular one isn't. I'll show you the scalping tool also, but this isn't that. This is the technique from the video, right? So this is point blank. And you can see how efficient it is, right, when you get this set up. Because we're taking a weekly to a daily to a 10-minute. Look at that. Another leg down. Look at that. Another massive leg down. Momentum gets overexhausted. Another leg down. Exhaustion. Another leg down. Now you can see why I put the early signals in here, right? Sometimes they literally get you right by the top. But exhaustion, just a tremendous leg down again, right? It's a gift that keeps on giving. Exhaustion. Look at it. Red again. This one waits. It makes you, you have to wait this one out ultimately. Maybe you decided to get out. You didn't like it. That's okay. But you either caught that one or re-entered here this next time, caught that one as well. Now, you see some little ones in here. I don't want to ignore them. There would have been a few that you got stopped out of. That happens. It's trading, right? Small losses. We take small losses. Again, you see how big the gains are? You see how small the losses are? not a 10-minute. You're going down to a 10-minute. It's pretty hard to get really accurate in that situation. And when you get significant trend, now this one is called a trend scalper for a reason, because I'm making sure with this technique that the trend is already there, right? That's why I'm comparing weekly to daily on top of it, right? So here we go again. Boom. The big one, right? That's the one that gets you in on a 10-minute scale at 38.9. It ends up dropping to 28,000 change. All right, so you guys kind of get the point. Now, by the way, it continued to pay you, right? So, I mean, you ended up getting this leg right here. You end up getting a little bit here. You probably end up getting stopped out at break even on that one. That's fine. But this one gives you basically the top. You get in, just wait out some sideways behavior. Nice dump for you again, because we've remained red in that situation. Another dump. I mean, it just keeps on paying. Now, of course, the market's been going down, but again, this is only designed specifically to find these scenarios, right? Otherwise, the signal would not have appeared, is the point. Okay. Last thing I'll show you. Now, this one I will give you, I'll tell you it comes with a caveat, right? Because we have what's called a 5-minute scalper. And in this 5-minute scalper, I'm going to do something. I'm going to turn this one off. I'm going to turn the 5-minute scalper on. I'll minimize this guy like this. I'll grow this guy like this. I already have it set up so that you're only looking at the 5-minute scalper. Let me actually put this one higher. So you're only going to see those particular signals, and I'll see how far it lets me go back. Now, there's one issue here, is that because of the way this is designed, it will repaint, right? Because it's based on a multi-time frame setup. And if one of those signals changes, so you might have a scenario to where, let's say this signal appeared, but because H4 did something significant during that time, then it may go back and repaint. There's no way around it. In real time, you're getting the right signal. So I will tell you that as a caveat, that some of this you have to take with a grain of salt, ultimately, because there might have been some repainting that went on, and it is necessary for this particular tool. But in real time, the tool works very well. Now, the key, though, with this tool is what? I always speak about environment, right? You want high volatility, ultimately, to utilize this tool. And you want to think that you're in a trending environment. This is for people that just like these lower time frames, right? So if you like these lower time frames and you're in a situation to where you're looking for that, well, once you start seeing the breakdown, we put the lower high in, and there's many versions of this. You can actually turn on 3 different versions. I just have one on right here, but I'm just going to grow this so you can kind of see what took place here, because I got a lot of messages about how people crush it on the scalper, right? So look at this. This is a 5-minute scalper, right? So 5-minute scalper, and this one gives you literally a top, a significant move down. Same thing. I always say 3 to 8 candles. Then after that, now you might have got stopped on this one, depending on where you chose your stop. You might have said, hey, no, I'm going to put my stop right above the 200. But regardless, if you didn't get stopped, obviously it gives you one hell of an entry. Here, again, hell of an entry, massive dump. And that's usually what things were focused on, is that people were talking about the fact that they really caught some significant dumps just using the scalper. Like, hey, man, I was using the scalper, and it dropped from 58,000 to 54,000 in 25 minutes. Okay, great. When that happens, that's a bonus, right? But this one got you in right there. Significant drop, especially when you're dealing on a 5-minute chart. Then it gave you some counter trends, right? Bull, 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 bull. Again, 3 to 8 candles, or else you're being greedy. That doesn't mean you have to take total profits, but cash in some profits in that time. You can either re-add if it pops up again, or if it still continues to drop, good, be happy. You still have part of your position, but you always want to lock in gains when you have some, because over time you'll see that you're then managing. Right? When you're managing, you're in a good spot. That's the idea. But again, here we go. Short, dump. This one, little rise up on the counter trend. Now this one again, right in that spot. 3 to 8 candles gives you a nice move on a 5-minute chart, etc. Again. So I'm just running through all of these. I'm going to kind of end this video in a moment. But one more time right there. Now some of the counters worked out fine. You see this. Now I have this scrunched up. Some of these moves are a lot bigger than you think. But during these counters, you see that you did have some times where you notice that the scalper didn't really turn on. But here's another one, big move down, nice move up, hell of a move down. And then as things really got exciting, it really started to pay off in a massive way if you happen to be on that scalper. So if you see high volatility, go on the scalper. It's not going to produce you, red signals, short signals when it's bouncing back. It's very rare. But you protect your position anyway. You keep tighter stops. But you could see how this thing continues to pay and pay and pay and pay and pay. And then ultimately some of the ultimate payoffs that we talked about. So just keep that in mind. This is something that anyone can use. Again, contact me on Twitter, direct message me, TrueCrypto28. For everyone else that's already utilizing it, if you didn't take advantage of some of these type of signals, watch those videos again. Blood, sweat, and tears. Put in the work of watching the videos and learning the tool. That's the key. Okay? TrueCrypto28, I'm out for now. I'll talk to you guys soon. Take care of yourself.